If you're not up to speed with EVE Online at the moment, we're currently awaiting the Cradle of War expansion, set to release on June 9th. There's a bunch of new content to look forward to, a whole new class of ships, more ways to participate in factional conflicts, and a new starter region for rookie capsuleers. But another major thing to look out for if you're a lore aficionado is the new Epic Arc missions. These visions of greatness have been described to us as playable, hyper-real simulations of defining battles from New Eden's past. We're going to be seeing 4 set pieces, one for each empire, aimed at introducing new and existing players alike to the history and ideals of the game's 4 primary factions. We also know which 4 historic lore events are going to be covered, so in this video we're going to take a look at those events in more detail. Just a disclaimer, we're working with somewhat limited information here. I don't have any privileged access to what Fenris Creations is cooking up in the background, so we're primarily going off discussions that took place at FanFest and in press releases. It's totally possible that in a couple of weeks when this expansion comes out, I got some details wrong for exactly what's coming, but in any case, this lore will be relevant and correct to the already established events of New Eden. First up, we have the Caldari Prime Breakout. It's important to remember when discussing this one how tightly associated early Caldari and Gallente history is. I'm so glad that FC have chosen this as one of the events to focus on, because it's actually a bit of a 2-for-1, giving a lot of backstory to both those empires and how they came to be. You might have wondered, for example, why Caldari Prime, the homeworld of the Caldari, is not in Caldari space, and this event is why that's the case. It was the pre-Federation Gallente Cultural Deliverance Society that arrived on Caldari Prime in 22,517 AD, making first contact with the Caldari with the intent of assisting what they saw to be a somewhat primitive people. The Caldari were initially welcoming to the massive boost in technological progress and economic prosperity that this encounter gave them, but remained steadfast in avoiding any kind of cultural homogenization, much to the frustration of the Gallente. Even as cooperation between these two empires led to incredible achievements, most notably the development of the warp drive and Stargate technology, the Caldari were widely regarded as a secondary, minor aspect of a predominantly Gallente civilization. Although most importantly, the Caldari were founding members of the Federated Union of Gallente Prime, most commonly referred to as the Gallente Federation alongside the Gallente, Intaki, and Manar. As the megacorporations we now so strongly associate with the Caldari gained power, disdain for their subservient position in the Federation became gradually more widespread. Against the Federation's directives, the Caldari had been founding their own hidden colonies in secret. Of course, such subterfuge would not go unnoticed forever, and the Senate met at an emergency summit when intelligence revealed those hidden colonies, demanding that the Caldari capitulate them to Federation control. The Caldari unsurprisingly refused this request, forming the Chief Executive Panel as their new governing body and formally seceding from the Federation. This was the spark that lit the fire which became the Caldari state as we know it today. We think now of such conflicts being interstellar in nature, but at this stage the Gallente and the Caldari homeworlds shared a solar system, not to mention the Federation's settlements with predominantly Gallente citizens on Caldari Prime itself. Attempts to sanction and disrupt the Caldari in their secession were swift, and met with equal attempts to reassert sovereignty by the new Chief Executive Panel. The new Caldari military forces sequestered from its member corporations immediately secured the Stargate network that allowed transit between Caldari Prime and previously hidden colonies. The Federation responded in kind by blockading the planet of Caldari Prime, starting a siege with the goal of attrition and ultimate surrender. With few ways to retaliate, the siege lasted for many months as the Caldari tried to wait out their attackers' resolve. It was not to be, however, as a group of Caldari ultra-nationalist partisans, known as the Templis Dragonors, ultimately tried to inflict a morale blow on the Federation, sabotaging the protective dome of the primarily Gallente-occupied underwater city of Nouvelle Rouvenor. An estimated 500,000 souls perished in the city's subsequent collapse. A far-right fascist party gained control of the Gallente Federation, running on a campaign of a swift retaliation against the seceding Caldari terrorists. Ultimately, the new president, Luc de Vela, suspended the constitution, declared a national emergency, and began a ruthless orbital bombardment campaign designed to break the spirit of the Caldari and force a surrender. Under such pressure, it should come as no surprise that the Caldari morale was weakening, and infighting at the highest levels of the state was starting to rear its head. The more militaristic corporations eventually rose to the highest prominence and began planning to evacuate their homeworld of Caldari Prime as an indefensible lost cause. It's at this point I expect our Epic Arc simulation content is most likely to commence. The Caldari state put together a last-ditch counterattack, using its significantly smaller and considerably less experienced naval forces to try and break the siege, if only temporarily, and allow an evacuation. After 2 weeks of fighting, giving the Gallente Navy ample time to reinforce its blockading fleet, the Chief Executive Panel finally indicated their intention to withdraw and abandon the counterattack. Caldari naval officer Yakia Toval-Toba, a decorated admiral, disobeyed the command to surrender and took direct strategic command over his loyal fleet of only a few dozen ships. Rather than making further attempts to break the blockade, he attacked the relatively undefended Gallente Prime within the same solar system, inflicting heavy casualties on the Federation. Operating under the presumption that this was the beginning of a much larger surprise attack, the Federation recalled much of its blockading force to defend Gallente Prime, allowing an opportunity for the originally planned evacuation. Admiral Toval-Toba's fleet suffered its own catastrophic losses as part of this guerrilla attack, eventually only the flagship carrier remaining. In his final acts to try and solidify the Caldari evacuation opportunity, and aware that his opportunity for a surprise attack with conventional weapons was well and truly expended, the Admiral plunged his ship into Gallente Prime's planetary atmosphere. 2 million people died in the impact, which caused widespread fires and debris that contributed to millions more deaths well after the initial crash. What the Capsuleer's role in the battle simulation will be is unknown right now, but if I was to guess, I think we'll be more involved in escorting the evacuation rather than with Admiral Toval-Toba's counterattack. Regardless, it'll be a very fun way for new players to be introduced to the events that kickstarted the Caldari state's independence. Before I jump into the next one, I just want to let everyone know that I started a Discord server. It's long overdue honestly, but if you're interested in talking about EVE, suggesting future video ideas, or even better, sending me horse memes, you can join at billpaid.me/Discord. The link is in the video description. For the Gallente mission, we're expecting this to take place during the liberation of Intaki. Now, Intaki is a very complicated area of politics in EVE, not least because many of the key events in its history have taken place during the time span of the game, rather than long before YC-105. Much like the Caldari, the Intaki were first encountered by the pre-Federation Gallente. They were initially quite technologically primitive, but this first contact massively sped up their research and development, and even centuries before the founding of the Federation, they had advanced to the point of interstellar colonization. The Intaki naturally joined the Federation immediately after it was founded, and became prominently involved in its politics and administration. They were especially highly represented in the Doves voting bloc, favouring diplomatic solutions over the more militaristic, hawkish ones. This more pacifist and diplomatic approach led to the Intaki showing sympathy to the Caldari during the outbreak of the Gallente-Caldari War, which subsequently caused mass crackdowns on Intaki political activists under the Federation's ultra-nationalist government. Many Intaki were imprisoned, exiled, or in other ways sanctioned for speaking in favour of Caldari interests, leading to the eventual formation of the Intaki Syndicate by those who no longer considered themselves loyal to the Federation. In YC-110, the now extremely powerful and very much independent Caldari state began a conquest to control the Gallente and Caldari shared home star system of Luminaire, with the ultimate goal of capturing Caldari Prime. If you like a good blast from the past, dust mercenaries were a key part of both sides of this invasion, being contracted both by the Gallente and Caldari forces to fight for control of the planet under the shadow of the Caldari Navy's Shigeru Leviathan-class Titan. Dust 514 players got to take part in this battle directly, and there's still plenty of footage of the fighting available on YouTube if you're curious to see it in greater detail. The Intaki, while often sympathetic to the Caldari struggles, remained true to their diplomatic principles. They were appalled with the state's violent invasion, but still remained committed to the power of the pen rather than the sword, desperately trying to convince the Federation against retaliation and further escalation of the conflict. Such aspirations and principles did not ultimately serve the Intaki when the state eventually reached their doorstep as part of the ongoing fighting, with the system falling into state control with relatively little violence in YC-111. Gradually, like a frog being slowly boiled, the Caldari took advantage of the Intaki's capitulation to exploit their many newly acquired systems for economic benefit, auctioning development rights to corporate bidders. The Intaki system was bid on and ultimately won by Ishikone Corporation. However, unbeknownst to most at the time, Ishikone's bid was placed on behalf of a wealthy anonymous Intaki capsuleer as a protective measure to prevent acquisition by a more cutthroat corporation. The system changed hands many times subsequently as capsuleers exercised their rights under the Concord Emergency Militia War Powers Act, but in YC-124, then Federation President Celis Agard decided that the Federal Defense Union Capsuleer Militia was not enough to secure Intaki and allow stable governance. The Federation Navy deployed capital fleets to overwhelm the Caldari Navy forces and quickly captured Intaki, as well as 10 other systems with more permanent occupying forces. I expect it's this invasion that players will participate in, experiencing the Federation's point of view through the Epic Arc simulation as it brings the Intaki system back under Gallente control. While the Caldari and Gallente Epic Arcs have been quite easy to interpret from press releases about Cradle of War, the Amarr and Minmatar ones prove a lot more challenging. Fenris Creations have not been quite as specific on which side each battle will be fought from, but there is maybe a little inference we can do. We've been told that at the Golgothan Fields, players will be fighting alongside a dreadnought. That, combined with the fact that the Battle of Pator was a resounding Matar victory, leads me to believe that we will probably be fighting Golgothan Fields as the Amarr, and at the Battle of Pator as Minmatar. These two events are much more closely linked than the Gallente and Caldari encounters we've looked at, both in terms of chronology and motivation. In fact, these are only a few weeks apart. Since it happened first though, let's start with the likely Minmatar-dominated experience of the Battle of Pator. For anyone unaware, Pator is a system in the Svipar constellation of High Matar and home to the planet Matar, the homeworld of the Matari tribes and capital of the Minmatar Republic. It was, however, from 22,480 AD to 23,216 AD, held by the Amarr Empire, and for many centuries before that formalized control, it was still a common target for Amarr slave raiders. The Battle of Pator, then, was one of the first actions of the Great Rebellion, in which all rebel forces congregated to swiftly liberate their homeworld from an imperial grip. The rebels had spent a long time preparing for this, constructing a surprisingly large armada of vessels at secret shipyards, and every ship in the fleet simultaneously acted in BYC-20 to cause as much havoc as possible. The strategy was a resounding success, and the Amarrians were caught off guard, losing many planets and systems in a matter of days. The main battle, which I suspect the new Epic Arc will focus on, was that of the primary Pator Imperial Navy Guard Fleet, the strongest Amarr force in the region, being engaged by the rebels in orbit of their home planet. I think we're most likely going to get stuck in on the surprise attack, potentially even in quite a big ship. It remains to be seen how that sort of thing will work though, as EVE has never really tried something like this, where capsuleers are in a simulation. From a technical standpoint, it might be that the capsuleers still need the relevant skills to fly the ship in the simulation, but I hope it gives newer players a chance to try out battleships very early on in their EVE time without the weeks of skilling that usually entails. Finally, and almost immediately after the Battle of Pator, we move on to the Battle of Golgothan Fields. This fight was essentially a rematch of the original rebellion, with the Amarr Empire now having had the time to recall their expeditionary fleets from other fronts. A formidable main battle fleet travelled from Geminate through Metropolis, destined for High Matar via Malden Heath. This was to be a ruthless counterattack. Emperor Hydaran VII had no desire to see the conflict draw out and distract from the Amarr-Jove War. The Minmatar rebels received intelligence of this main battle fleet's movements from forward scouts, and the decision was made to cut the fleet off in the Anur system of the Eadolf constellation in Malden Heath. Once again compelled to concentrate all their forces into one engagement, this battle had the potential to define the future of the Matari people. It is here in Anur I expect the Epic Arc to take place. FC have said that players will fight alongside a capital ship rather than in one, so I won't get my hopes up too high, but they make a very good point, that for a lot of pilots, this might be the first and potentially only time that they get this up close and personal with a capital ship. Aside from the avatars near the Amar trade hub, you can go a long time in EVE without encountering its capital and super capital ship classes. I still vividly remember when I took my first Titan bridge and how exciting that was. Here at Golgothan Fields, the Amar Empire were ultimately able to force a withdrawal of the Minmatar forces, but the damage wrought on the Imperial fleet was devastating. The Imperial Navy was decimated, losing many capital ships, but naturally a victory was claimed as part of the Empire's anti-rebellion propaganda. Not only had the Emperor failed to quell the uprising, but this along with other military failures contributed to the Amar suing for peace with the Jovians. Don't forget to check out the new epic arc when it drops on June 9th. From what I understand, it should be incredibly accessible, so no matter where in EVE you live or what activities you typically do, I highly encourage supporting FC in this new commitment to in-game narrative and lore experiences. Hopefully this is the start of many more similar projects to come, as it's long overdue that EVE's lore become accessible beyond reading walls of text on the EVE Universe website. Before I tell you about this video's sponsor, I do just briefly want to mention that I started a second channel. If you like my style of content or my writing and you're interested in videos that aren't about EVE, then my second channel, Billiam McPaid, is where that stuff is going to be in future. I already have made quite a bit of non-EVE content that's ended up on this channel over the past few months, but I'm trying as much as possible to move things over there. I don't want people who subscribe to see my EVE content also having to put up with me waxing lyrical about Zero parades. If you want to help support the channel, consider buying your next EVE Online pack, subscription, or Plex from marqueedragon.com using the link in the video description. Use coupon code BILL at checkout for 3% off your order. I've also got YouTube membership enabled now. It's 99 cents, and for that you'll get access to my monthly video where I go through some of the interesting comments for each month, more of an unscripted rant if I'm honest, and I'm sure I'll have more casual unscripted content available for members too, as and when the mood arises. I really appreciate everyone that already signed up, as it's all helped me invest in the software and hardware I need to keep making better videos.